Rob joined Northwest Cable News anchor team in 2009. Prior to that, Rob joined the King 5 team in 2006. Before that, he was a weekend anchor in Phoenix, and after 3 years in the desert, wanted to get back to his native Northwest. He's a Skagit Valley native and a graduate of the Cedro-Woolley High School. He went to Western Washington for college, earning his journalism degree from the University of Washington. Stayed in Western Washington for college, University of Washington. He began his career in Yakima, working as a one-man band, reporter, photographer, and editor. From there, he moved to Boise, Idaho, where he worked as an anchor and reporter and traveled to China, reporting on that country's orphan crisis. His next stop was Las Vegas, where he anchored a 2-hour show, Good Morning Las Vegas. During his career, Rob worked and has been honored with multiple Emmy Awards for his reporting and his prestigious National Edward R. Murrow Award for his writing. When he's not working, he spends time in the gym, recording music in his home studio, and remodeling his historic home. He is married to Evening Magazine reporter Kim Holcomb. Please welcome Rob Piercy.
Well, thank you and good afternoon. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Seattle Rotary for hosting today's forum with the leading candidates for Washington Governor, Jay Inslee and Rob McKenna. A little bit about our format today. It's going to be quite casual. We will have 15 minutes with each candidate. There will be no introductory remarks. We'll just get straight to the Q&A and cover a range of topics. And because of our limited time frame, we won't be taking questions from the audience today, but hopefully we will be touching base on many of the topics that are important to you moving toward the November election. We have asked the candidates to limit their responses to roughly 60 to 90 seconds. Once the 15 minutes is up, we will allow an additional 90 seconds for a closing remark. The candidates will appear in alphabetical order. So first on stage, please join me in welcoming Mr. Jay Inslee. And to make sure we stay on time, I have my little smartphone here to set the timer. What did we do before these? I don't remember. Yeah, those old-fashioned things that were on our wrist?
Rob, you got a clock for me over here, buddy?
You should have a clock there in front of you you can see.
Is this the one that's working here?
Can you see it?
Yeah, if we can get having trouble seeing it. We'll go with that.
Wish we had a bigger one, sorry. First, Mr. Inslee, I would like to start with health care. Tomorrow, the Supreme Court is likely to rule on the Affordable Health Care Act. If the court strikes down all of the law or just the individual mandate, what steps would you take, if elected governor, to ensure people in our state have access to affordable care?
Well, first, Rob, thanks for starting on the easy issues. I appreciate you. Look, we know there is what is not an option for our state or our country, and that is inaction. We need action in health care no matter what the Supreme Court does. We have problems that need resolution. Each one of us who has insurance is spending $1,000 a year in a premium to pay for those who do not. Breast cancer survivors without this law will lose their access to insurance. Men with prostate cancer will be able to be denied insurance. Our 25-year-old sons and daughters who are living in our basements looking for that first job will be kicked off their insurance. And importantly, the 35% tax credit that small businesses have under this law will go by the wayside. I don't believe any of those things should happen. If the Supreme Court rules as I hope they do not, our state will need to work together in a bipartisan fashion to embrace preventative health care and protection of everyone, including survivors of breast cancer. These folks should not be kicked off their insurance. I hope that the Attorney General's lawsuit is not successful in removing protection for women with breast cancer.
Let's talk jobs now. Preliminary May numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics show that more than 292,000 people are unemployed in Washington state. Can you name some specific ways you would help to put them back to work?
You bet. Fundamentally, I am running for governor of the state of Washington because if I'm given this honor, I intend to get up every single morning, given every fiber I've got, to getting these people back to work. And I have both the experience and the plan to do it. I have the experience working with the biotechnology industry. I was Biotech Legislator of the Year a few years ago. I have experience in helping the clean energy industry move forward. And today we are seeing the growth of clean energy across this state. You know where the world's most durable solar cell is made? Marysville, Washington, at the Silicon Energy Plant. The largest provider of energy efficiency is in Seattle and Spokane at the McKenna Company. I have experience working with aviation and aeronautics, helping to win the tanker contract. And because I've had experience on both sides of the mountains, I understand the full breadth of our industry, and I was the one who helped to get our apples into Japan. I know the economic basis of this state, and it is based on this secret, innovation. And I have a plan that is focused on innovation. I'll mention one thing that we need to do in our plan. You can check it out at jinslee.com. Today, when we do great research at the University of Washington and Washington State University, we're not getting it into a commercial situation. We are not spinning off small businesses as fast as we can. If we spin off research from the University of Washington half as fast as we do at the University of Utah, we will create $3 billion of economic opportunity with small businesses. I have a plan to do that. It is a plan based on what we do in the state of Washington. We invent, we create, we build, we create intellectual property, and we sell it to the world. And when I'm governor, I intend to do just that.
We remain in a budget crisis in Washington State. If elected, what would you do differently than your Democratic predecessor?
Well, I don't look at this in ideological terms. Look, we've had good governors of both parties. Dan Evans did some great work. I'm not running against any of the previous 22 or so governors. I'm running to create a vision for job creation that is equal to the optimism of the state of Washington. That's why I'm running for governor of the state of Washington. And what I intend to do is to do what we have always done in this state, which is to lead the world in technology. Look, we led a technological revolution in aerospace. We led a revolution in software. Now I believe we need a plan to do the same thing in biotechnology, in life sciences. Just talked to my friend Bill Center about the opportunities in life sciences globally. And by the way, congratulations to your work in polio. In clean energy, think of the opportunities in energy. You know, I got involved in this some time ago. I wrote a book about how we can jumpstart economic development around clean energy. And now the ideas that I've talked about are bearing fruit. You know where the Western Hemisphere's first low-head hydroelectric generating plant is? It's in Selah, Washington, in the Rosa Canal as we speak, generating pure electricity. This is a job creation opportunity for us, and we need a governor who is equal to that moment. And I intend to step up to the plate to do that. And we have not done enough. In my job creation program, I have proposed an R&D tax credit for small businesses. You know, if you're a small business person, a woman named Susan Petty has a company called Altarock. They've developed a technology to drill water down, bring it up hot, produce electricity with zero pollution. But, you know, it's tough getting capital for small businesses. So I have proposed a research and development tax credit for small businesses so that they can help, that even for pre-revenue companies, so that they can help create capital. This is what we need, because to solve the revenue problems, we need economic growth. This is the engine that is going to right the fiscal condition of the state of Washington.
Mortgage delinquencies in our state were up 7% in the first quarter of this year. One in nearly every 1,600 homes is in foreclosure. The mortgage crisis is not over in our state. What can be done?
Well, it's a segue from my last answer, which is economic development. We have 300,000 people out of work, and job creation has to be the central focus of the next governor. Now, when I created my job creation plan, which will help this issue, I didn't look at it by saying we should take the ideology from the right, or we should take the ideology from the left. I developed a plan that was specific to the industrial capacity of the state of Washington. And that plan is comprehensive. Think of the tourism opportunities we have in this state. We aren't taking advantage of them. I met with the wine industry in Tri-Cities, wine industry leaders, last week talking about how we've got to start a tourism system with a public-private partnership that can help market the incredible bounty we have in this state. Think about this. We have huge military opportunities here, large military investment in this state and activity, but we get half as much business from the military for our small businesses as most states in the Union. So in my jobs creation plan, I have a plan to boost a program we have to help small businesses negotiate the procurement systems with the Pentagon to try to boost that activity. In biotechnology, we have enormous opportunity in biotechnology. But what biotechnology sells is intellectual property. We don't have a lot of coal or gas in our state. What we have is intellectual property. So in my job creation plan, I have proposed a situation where if a business wants to do business with the state of Washington, you're going to need to show that you've exercised best practices to not use stolen property, stolen from Microsoft and other countries, other companies. 90% of what Microsoft makes is stolen in China. So the plan I have developed is specific to the talents and opportunities of our state. We've got to get beyond this ideological battle. We've got to find bipartisan solutions across the state of Washington, and that's what I'm offering.
Let's talk about education now. In January, the Washington Supreme Court ruled the state isn't meeting its constitutional obligation to amply pay for basic public education. Can you give us some specific measures that you would take to meet that obligation?
Yes, and resources is an issue, and I'll come back to that, but I want to start with reform. We can't wait for another several $billion. We need to start reforming our educational system today. You know, we are first in technology jobs, that's good, but we are 46th in the production of our own children that have high-tech degrees. We have 25% of our children not graduating from high school. And I believe we have to embrace a no excuses policy in education, no excuses for any of the adults in the system. That's why in my educational reform program, I'm calling for an excellent teacher in every single classroom. We cannot allow a situation where a teacher in a single classroom is not performing up to par. And that's why I'm insisting that we have a very strong evaluation system. And in fact, if teachers are not performing up to par, they need to be removed from the system, and I am proposing that. We need to focus on early childhood education, which is a tremendous boost. We need to have higher expectation for a lot of our kids that we've kind of given up with. You know, we have a 50% dropout rate in our African American kids with a huge achievement gap. That's unacceptable. And we need to create an expectation that every single child graduates. And one of the ways we do this is to have sort of a default where you are defaulted into an advanced placement or a science technology degree. If we do this, we get participation of all of the children. And what I am seeing across this state are the seeds of tremendous growth and innovation of how we educate our kids at the Lincoln Center in Tacoma, Delta, and Tri-Cities, right here at the Aviation High School. And I have a plan to extend that innovation in a way that continues to be accountable to the public. Now, coming back to resources, we do need additional resources. And the way we do that is four things. One, job creation, which is the single most important way that we have to generate revenues for the state. Second, lean management. You know, Boeing, best aviation company in the world, has embraced this lean management system of constant quality improvement. There is no reason that should not be the expectation in every single agency, and I will make it an expectation in every single agency. Third, we've got to adopt a preventative health care system. We really don't have a health care system right now. We have a sick care system. We don't prevent illness. We treat it after it happens. And I have a plan to do that. Take the savings and put it into education. And fourth, look, there's some loopholes out there that are outworn their worthiness. And we need to look at some of these loopholes that exist that some lobbyists got that aren't helping schools. We do these 4 things. We're going to put money back into our schools. We are going to reverse the slide of our terrible lack of educational resources for our colleges, and we're going to increase STEM degrees.
After 7 terms in Congress, you know what works and doesn't work to get policies advanced. If elected, tell us something that you won't do as governor.
What I won't do is set low bars. You know, when you think about our state, I mean, I love our state. I'm a 5th-generation son of the state of Washington. I grew up in White Center. I chased a girlfriend for 7 years at Ingram, caught her. We've been in a perfect marriage for 39 years. That's a marriage between a husky and a cougar, so it's been a perfect marriage. So this state's very deep, and I think we have a particular genius in our state. And that genius is we always move forward. The status quo is not acceptable to us, and moving backward is abhorrent to us. And I want to keep our state moving forward. That is why I've proposed a forward-looking economic plan which helps us innovate in the clusters of industries that we know have the best opportunity for growth in our state. And it is my belief that when you set high bars and high expectations, you get results. And I intend to set those high expectations for the governor's office, for principals, for teachers, and even the business communities. Because I'm going to come to this community and ask you to help. Help in mentoring programs for our kids. Help giving kids internship programs so that they can get access for an idea of their future. And I'm just bullish on an opportunity to do this. I can't turn over a rock in this state without meeting an entrepreneur with a great idea that simply needs policies to help, from transportation infrastructure to better college access to a tax system that helps a little bit in capital formation for these small businesses. So that's what I'll do, set high expectations.
We have time for one more question before a closing remark. My son graduated from kindergarten this week, and preparing for today, I was reminded of the essay, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. Can you tell us something that you learned as a child that shaped who you are as a leader today?
That's a state secret. I can't. So something I learned as a child. Well, I'll just tell you one thing I learned, which is the power of great teaching. And I think that's pretty important in the governor's race. My dad was a biology teacher at South and Garfield. And one of the joys I have going around the state is meeting people who have come up and say, hey, are you Frank Inslee's son? I go, yeah. And he said, I had your dad for biology at South in 1958. And he made a difference in my life. I love hearing that story, not just because about my dad, but it is a story about what teaching can do for our state. And it's a generational issue. My brother's an art teacher in Bellingham. I was in Bellingham at a hotel a few months ago, and I met a guy, assistant manager, and he said, are you Frank Inslee's brother? And I said, yeah, why? And he said, well, I had your brother in Bellingham. And I said, well, great, how'd it work out? And he said, well, I got to tell you, when I went in there, I was ready to drop out. I was a dropout, heading for dropout. And I got involved in art through your brother, and he kind of got me turned on to art. And I stayed in school, and here I am, and I'm really happy to be a manager at this business. I guess there's some stories there to me, meaning if we can inspire an educational experience where every child has that great teaching, we're going to do great things. And I believe we can do this in this state. I hope people will look at my educational plans at jinslee.com. They're based on high expectations, and I believe we can fulfill them.
All right, Mr. Inslee, 90 seconds for a closing remark.
I think you've heard the best. I'm not sure I've got much left. You know, we've come through a hard time, and we're not through it yet, although Floyd Jones tells me that he believes Europe's going to make it through, and we're going to keep getting back on the right track. But I think in a time like that, it is appropriate and necessary for us to take stock of who we are as a people in the state of Washington. And my belief is that with all the difficulty we have, and with all the fiscal challenges we're going to have in the next several years, this is not going to be a walk in the park for the next governor. But I believe in that kind of situation, we have always got to keep our eyes on the prize about who we are and what our values are and what we do best. And I am proposing that we continue to move forward like we have in the past. We've moved forward in technological innovation. We've moved forward on issues of how we treat each other and whether we respect each other in our diversity. We've moved forward on our educational system. And I believe we can continue to do that, to have a governor with the experience that got apples into Japan, helped solve the spectrum problem for Microsoft, worked to get the tanker contract for Boeing, got clean energy jobs started across this state. I'm willing to bring that experience to this great state, and I'll look forward to working with you. Hope I can win your vote. Thanks a million. Thanks to Rotary.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jay Inslee. And now, if you would, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Rob McKenna. I'd like to start with health care with you as well, Mr. McKenna. The Supreme Court, as I said, is expected to rule tomorrow on the Affordable Care Act. You are among the attorneys general who sued the federal government over the individual mandate. If the court strikes down the mandate or the entire law, what is your plan for giving the people of Washington access to affordable health care?
Well, first of all, thanks to Seattle Rotary for having me back again to speak. I really appreciate it. I didn't bring Connor with me this time, although he would have liked the ice water with all the cubes floating, if you remember the last time I was here. And secondly, I'm sorry we didn't get to make this the traditional Seattle 4 Rotary debate. Sorry that Congressman Inslee's campaign wouldn't permit that. In fact, I even went to the trouble of memorizing a little country western song to prepare. But it is a wonderful opportunity to be here. There are several things we're going to be doing to implement health care reform to improve quality, access, and cost control, regardless of what the Supreme Court does tomorrow. I think what they're going to announce is that the mandate is unconstitutional, as Congress was warned it might be when they decided to include it. But they're not going to strike down the rest of the law. Only one judge in the country has done that. He was overturned on that question on appeal. What they will do if they strike down the mandate is probably knock out a couple of the closely connected insurance regulations. The rest of the law will stand. And that means we're going to be implementing the health insurance exchange. The health insurance exchange is a model to allow low-income people to buy health insurance and to have a subsidy in doing that. That's the right way to go. We want people to own things. We want them to own their insurance policy. If we need to help them with a subsidy to buy the insurance policy, that's good. Number two, there will be an expansion of people on Medicaid. In fact, one of the biggest challenges our state health care system faces in the next several years is the fact that medical or health care providers aren't sure how to handle another 400,000 to 500,000 people in our state on Medicaid. But we've got to find a way to do it. One way to handle the increased cost is to move more people in Medicaid into coordinated care or managed care. We've been pretty successful at that so far in our state, better than most states, but there are still thousands more people who could be in coordinated care systems, which are better for them, are more cost effective, etc. Third, we need to bend the health care cost curve for state employees by using the new plans that just became available last November and encouraging more of them to go into these consumer-directed health care plans that have lower premiums, a higher deductible, and a health savings account to allow them to cover the cost of their deductible. The state of Indiana has over 85% of their employees who voluntarily moved into those plans in about 7 years. They're saving 11% over what they would have spent on health insurance as a result. In our budget, where health insurance premiums for state employees and some K-12 employees is now about 9% of the entire budget, around $3 billion, that would be an enormous savings.
There is some speculation that the balance of power in the state Senate could shift in the upcoming election. But if it doesn't, and you become the first Republican governor in this state in more than a quarter century, and you face a democratically controlled House and Senate, how do you advance your agenda?
The same way I've advanced my agenda as Attorney General. I've been Attorney General for 8 regular sessions of the state legislature. In every one of those sessions, I have brought forward bills that would protect victims of domestic violence, address open and accountable government, improve our state's consumer protection laws and antitrust laws, gone after sex offenders who threaten children. And in every one of the legislative sessions, they've passed bills that I've introduced. In fact, 45 bills have been adopted by a democratically controlled legislature and signed into law by the governor. And all of those bills had bipartisan support. The key is understanding how to bring people together to sit down around the table to work on issues of common concern, to identify common solutions, and then to move forward together. For example, for all the years that she was there until she retired, since I've been AG, former Majority Leader Lynn Kessler was a very important ally of mine. She helped me move a number of bills through. Auditor Brian Sontag has been an important ally of mine on several bills. He's also endorsing me for governor. He's one of a long list of Democrats for Rob who we announced a few weeks ago. So you have to build that bipartisan coalition, that consensus. That's how we do things in Olympia. Doesn't mean there isn't fighting. Of course there are disagreements. There are disagreements between the House and the Senate, much less between the Senate Republicans and Democrats, but we still get things done. We're not Washington, D.C., and we don't want to become Washington, D.C. or Congress. We want to continue to be successful as we have been over the last several years.
You heard me mention earlier that the preliminary numbers for May show that about 292,000 Washingtonians are still out of work. There are probably a number of employers represented in this room. Can you name some fiscal tools that you would use as governor to encourage hiring, more hiring by those employers?
Well, yeah, we need to lower the cost of hiring and employing people. We're one of the most expensive states in America in which to run a business, in which to employ people. We have some of the highest workers' comp costs in the country. We have some of the highest unemployment insurance costs. We have a heavy regulatory burden. We have the only state-level gross receipts tax, the B&O tax. There's a lot that we can do. We've got to stop being one of the most expensive states with one of the highest effective tax rates on business. So we tackle those. Let me give you one example of how we do that. We're one of only 4 states in the country that monopolizes workers' comp. I mean, unless you're big enough to qualify as a self-insurer, you're not allowed any other option. You have to buy your industrial insurance, your workers' comp coverage from the state. 46 other states have opened their systems up to competition, Oregon among them. And they've had much better experience in controlling costs than we have. We need to do this not only because it's more fair to the employer and the employees, because we're the only state where employees have to pay in themselves into workers' comp, but we need to do this because there is a looming enormous unfunded liability in the workers' comp system. And you may have seen the L&I announced and then sort of started to back off from a 19% 10-year increase in L&I premiums to address that unfunded liability. That's a job killer. And we need to move to other alternatives to get our arms around that cost set.
Let's move to education and specifically higher ed. The price of a college education in the state has skyrocketed over the last few years. What plan do you have in place to provide some sort of meaningful relief in the short term for families, students headed off to school in the next 1, 2, 3 years?
You put the question very well. It's the price that's gone up, not the cost. What I mean is the UW and WSU have worked very, very hard to keep the cost of educating an undergraduate basically flat for the last 10 years. It's about $16,000 a year. What's happened is that the amount of that cost that's been borne by the state budget has dramatically shrunk, and the amount borne by families and by students putting themselves through school has skyrocketed. So, for example, when I was student body president at the University of Washington, about 75% of the cost of an undergraduate education was covered by the state budget. 25% came from tuition. Last year, 2010-2011, my daughter Madeline was student body president at the University of Washington. And by the time she left, it was upside down. About 75% of the cost was from tuition, and 25% was from the state budget. We need to get back at least to a 50-50 deal. You can't do it in one budget. It'll take several budgets. But yesterday, with the Seattle Times editorial board, I laid out a vision for how we get there. It has one significant component and then one other component. The most significant component is this. We're not going to get out of the hole we're in for K-12 and higher ed until we contain the growth rate of the costs of government in the non-education areas. So my proposal is to cap the growth rate of spending on non-education areas by the state government to inflation plus population. The forecast over the next several biennia is 6% per biennium for inflation plus population. So we allow them to grow because there will be demands, but we don't allow them to grow as fast. And then we take the excess of revenue over that 6%, and the revenue is projected after the next biennium to grow at 9.2% a biennium, and we invest that extra money plus the baseline amount of money in higher ed and in K-12. Under this approach, again, assuming OFM's projections, we would be able to increase funding for K-12 by $5.5 billion by 2019-2021, in other words, within 8 years, and to increase funding for higher ed by $750 million within 8 years. And that's above the baseline growth they would see anyway, because we're not going to allow them to be cut and cut and cut as the people running Olympia have been doing.
Let's kind of expand on that a little bit. You talked about the modest growth that we're expected to see in revenue in the coming years, but may not be enough to fix the state's ongoing budget problems. Can you tell us 3 specific areas or programs that you would target for cuts or reductions if elected?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, we need to shrink the cost of administration and overhead in our state government. This is what we've done in my office. In my office, the Attorney General's office, which is one of the, I think, the top 12 agencies in state government, we have reduced the amount we spend and the amount we bill our clients by about $30 million over the last 4 years. We have fewer employees than we did when I became Attorney General in 2005. We've accomplished this, first of all, by making our deepest cuts in administration and overhead. Secondly, by empowering and engaging all of our employees. In fact, that was the subject of my last speech here, as you may recall, is how we've done that. Engaging and empowering, lifting everybody up in a constant process of quality improvement, which increases productivity. We link their performance to their pay. So they actually get paid in part based on how well they do, not simply based on how long they've held their jobs. Other steps that we could take that would help in this direction would include using existing provisions in state law for competitive bidding, for bidding out what the state buys that it could buy in the private sector from a nonprofit or it could buy from a for-profit business. IT services, some human services, printing, building maintenance, etc. You put it out to bid. You empower your state employees to bid on the contracts. You allow private bidders to come in from the for-profit and nonprofit worlds. You see where you get your best deal. It works. Performance management, competitive bidding, these are tools that aren't being utilized today except in scattered cases. We need to use them systematically throughout state government.
Let's talk about transportation. For 2011, the Seattle area ranked 7th on the list of worst metro areas for congestion at an estimated cost of about $1 billion a year. But even beyond Seattle, you travel to Bellingham during rush hour, through Marysville, even in my hometown of Cedar Woolley on Highway 20, it's congested. What plan do you have to currently address the ongoing problem of traffic congestion?
Well, I've been traveling the state for years as Attorney General, of course. I've been in every county, on every Indian reservation. I've visited 100 schools. I mean, I know the state backwards and forwards, and I've been traveling even longer around transportation issues. I served on the State Transportation Improvement Board for years during my service on the County Council. And you are absolutely right, Rob. There are big challenges throughout the state. In the rural areas, they have farm-to-market roads that are threatened to go back to gravel because they don't have the budget to maintain them. In small towns, they have major infrastructure problems. So how do we address it? There are 2 things. First, we need a statewide transportation package. We're going to need to go back to the voters with another package of investments in 2013 or 2014, depending on how fast we can get it through the legislature, that will not only provide for preservation, maintenance, and improvements of our state facilities, like I-90, I-5, North-South Freeway in Spokane, and so forth, but will also include new revenue sources or increases in the revenue sources for local governments. They desperately need the help. Some of it will always be on the city's budget, of course, but the cities and counties have always also had some help from the state through a share of the motor vehicle fuels tax, and they need to continue to have that going forward. So some help for them at a local level will be crucial as well. Third, we need to reinvest in the State Public Works Trust Fund. It's a revolving fund that the state legislature has been raiding in recent years, taking money out of this revolving fund so it's not available for local infrastructure improvements. And fourth, we need to move to the use of tax increment financing in this state that will allow jurisdictions around the state, from ports to cities to counties, to bond against future property value increases and the revenues from those increases to make infrastructure improvements today that will support economic growth and development. Those are all tools that we need to use. There's not one thing we need to do. It's a package of steps that we need to take.
Time for one more question before a closing remark. Tell us something not on your political resume that proves your ability to lead Washington State as its next governor.
Well, I have been deeply involved in my community since I was a kid. I learned this from my parents. My dad was a career Army officer, 34 years, including service in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. My mom was a public school teacher. I sort of grew up in a kind of an environment where we breathed public service, and so I got involved as soon as I could, initially through the Boy Scouts. I went on to volunteer as a high school student, college student, and as a practicing attorney. I've never limited my community service to my elected office. I've always been involved in the community and in volunteer roles, to this day, serving on the Chief Seattle Council of the Boy Scouts, serving on the board until the end of this month of the Bellevue College Foundation, where I've been for 12 years, on the Bellevue Schools Foundation board for 9 years. It's important to give back to the community. And what I've learned, what I've taken away from that, is not only a sense of giving back to the community that my parents and I adopted when we moved here, when Dad retired from the Army. But what I've learned is how to work with people from an astonishing variety of backgrounds, how to build coalitions and collaborative efforts to address the issues of our day, whether it's domestic violence, as volunteer at Eastside Domestic Violence Program, education with the schools and with the colleges, or any of the other issues that have captured my heart and my wife's heart. One issue we've worked on just recently, as in the last 4 years, is to become very involved in supporting foster parents and to support improvements to the foster care system. My wife, because she worked briefly at DSHS on a grant, and I, because it's the biggest issue we have in our office, is protecting kids. So what you might not know about me that you can take from my civic resume is I've done a lot beyond my elected service. I've put countless hours into community service because I think you need to lead where you're volunteering, not just where you're getting paid.
90 seconds for a closing remark.
Thank you very, very much again for this wonderful opportunity. Let me stress to you that I believe that the only way forward in this state is for all of us to work together. That means we avoid the Washington, D.C. approach of hyper-partisan politics, which you're already seeing in this campaign, relentlessly partisan attacks. And we go instead with the way we've been doing things in Washington State for a long time, which is to work together. We will have our disagreements. We will have Republicans and Democrats disagreeing on issues. Of course, it is a representative democracy. But there is clearly a lot of room to work together. I'm very proud of my bipartisan record as Attorney General working in Olympia. I'm proud of the fact that my colleagues at the National Association of AGs elected me president last year and then chose me as Outstanding Attorney General with the Kelly Wyman Award. It was Democrats and Republicans who made that decision. It's because as AGs, we work together constantly. It was 49 state AGs working together that brought back the largest consumer financial protection settlement in American history with a $25 billion settlement with America's 5 largest loan servicers. It's an approach I'm very comfortable with. It's an approach that I know how to use effectively. It's the approach that I'll use as your governor. I ask for your vote. Thank you very much.
Mr. Rob McKenna. Again, I want to say thanks to Rotary for hosting this forum and to the candidates for being here, and hopefully you learned something today that will be meaningful when you cast your vote. So thank you.
Seattle Rotary Online is made possible in part by a grant from First Choice Health, working with the Washington Health Information Collaborative to use technology to bring better health care to patients throughout the Pacific Northwest. First Choice Health.